Hey, good morning, small business owners. Welcome to Monday Morning Metrics on this cold January morning. My name is Rebecca Berneck. I am the founder and big head of Office Heads. We are a financial management firm located in Evanston, Illinois, supporting small businesses, typically service type businesses with their financial management. So today we are, here we are in January, and so there are quite a few financial events, just several financial events that happen in the first quarter of every fiscal year, calendar year. And so in January, the first IRS deadline is about payroll tax forms. And today what we're talking about is generating 1099 miscellaneous forms. So, there are two different types of payroll tax forms. The W-2 form, which goes to employees that you employ, actually employees, and then there are the non-employee contractors. The deadline for both of those particular forms is the end of January. Typically, it's January 31st. For 2019 is indeed January 31st. Sometimes if it lands on a weekend, they might give you a little extra time. But this year, January 31st is the day that your W-2s and your 1099s need to be postmarked and sent in the mail. Now, again, we're focusing this on this Monday morning metric on 1099s, not W-2s, 1099s. But either way, hopefully you are using a payroll company. We love Gusto. So if you're looking for a really good partner for payroll, which also includes your 1099s, I would definitely look into Gusto. Great value, great service. We love them here at Office Heads. So the first thing that you want to think about when it comes to your 1099 contractors is the threshold. So the threshold, it's been the threshold for several years now, is you have to pay these contractors $600 or more in order for them to be eligible for a 1099. So say you've got someone who's cleaning your office, you've paid them $550 over the course of the last 12 months, they do not need a 1099. If you pay them $601, then they need a 1099. So you think about all of your contractors and various different eligible vendors to see if they're eligible based on the amount of money that you pay to them. Now, there are several different types. Now, some people think, oh, it's just contractors, but it's a little bit more than contractors. And so we like to, if you're using QuickBooks, this is going to be a recommendation that we recommend that you use the QuickBooks wizard. So there is a 1099 wizard in both QuickBooks Online and QuickBooks Desktop that helps you to identify who's eligible, what their threshold is, and whether or not they need a 1099. So there are several types of contractors that require a 1099. The most common is your non-employees or your contractors, someone who you hire to design your website, someone you hire to clean your office. Things like that is an employee, but not is a contracted employee. And they'll also say they're a 1099 contractor because they require a 1099. They're definitely not a W-2. Next, so it's not just your contractors. Next, another common one is anybody that you're paying rents to. So if you have an office and you are paying monthly rent, then you need to send a 1099 to your landlord. There's a specific box on that 1099, which is box number 1, that needs to be filled up for anybody you're paying rents to. Another common one are attorneys, whether or not they're an LLC or an S Corp or a C Corp. And oh, by the way, you don't need to send a 1099 to an Inc., not to an S Corp or S Corp or C Corps don't need a 1099, but LLCs do. So here's a tip for when you are getting new vendors in. Enter in whether or not they're an LLC or an Inc. when you enter them into your QuickBooks file. That way, when it comes to 1099s, you know immediately whether or not they are eligible because of their structure. But here, attorneys, regardless of whether they're an LLC, partnership, S Corp, doesn't matter their entity, attorneys on box number 7 of a 1099 require a 1099. Okay, so I had mentioned the QuickBooks 1099 wizard. The 1099 wizard asks a number of things, and not only does it keep in mind that $600 threshold, it first of all has you identify which accounts in your chart of accounts contain any expenses that might be eligible for a 1099. So for example, when I went through my wizard, and I actually did it this weekend, I wouldn't select office supplies because office supplies are actual supplies. They are not services. But I did select my IT vendor. I did select the people who clean my office. I selected my attorney, my legal line. So anytime when I do my bookkeeping and I use those charts of accounts, in the background, QuickBooks is identifying and all of those transactions on whether or not they end up at the end of the year or in January to be put on a 1099. So number one, it's the eligible accounts in your chart of accounts that should be considered. The next thing that the wizard will ask you about are those eligible vendors. So this is another thing that, as again, you have new vendors throughout the year that you are bringing on and paying money to, if they're providing you non-employee services and they're eligible for a 1099, there is a place in QuickBooks, there's a little check mark that says 1099. Now, if you want to be super proactive, and this is my definite best practice, whenever you bring in a contractor that is eligible for receiving a 1099, don't pay them until you've received a W-9. Now, a W-9 form is the IRS form, similar to a W-4 if you're an employee. A W-9 just basically takes that information on what their name is, whether they're a sole proprietor and they'll give you a social security number, or whether they are incorporated and they give you a tax ID number and their mailing address. All the important information you need in order to send those 1099s out is on that W-9 form. So again, best practice, anytime you bring someone in and you're going to pay them for a service and you know down the line that they are going to get a 1099, don't pay them until you get a signed contract and a W-9 form, because then you are prepared come January and you're not running around and trying to ask for those 1099s. Now, I had two that I had to ask for, and here we are, the 20th of January. I again think it's best practice that you grab that W-9 at the time that you're incurring those expenses. I was lucky enough that the two people I sent an email out over the weekend actually responded, so I got my W-9s back. Worst case scenario, you're doing a bunch of things in January. The last thing you want to do is be on the phone tracking down contractors to get their W-9 forms. So the next thing before you send out your 1099s is to reconcile your accounts. Without knowing you've got really accurate data in your books, how do you know whether or not those 1099s are going to be accurate? And I'll say worst case scenario, what if you entered a bill in twice for a contractor accidentally? Or what if you forgot to enter a bill in from a contractor? When you run your 1099s through that wizard, it's going to pull in the data that's there. So please make sure that it's accurate. Reconcile all of your accounts, monthly best practice. Or here you are, this is your January task of reconciling all of your accounts for the entire year if you have not kept up on your bookkeeping. But you really want to make sure that that information is absolutely accurate, so when you run those 1099s that they are indeed accurate. Now, whether or not you're doing your 1099s or you have a financial partner such as a CPA or an accountant doing your 1099s, they need all of that information. They don't just pop in and go, hey, we're going to run your 1099s for you. They'll actually generate those 1099s, but they need to know how much you paid them, eligible dollars, their information that comes on a W-9, whether or not they're eligible, all of that information you still need to gather on a regular basis. So I said best practice is anytime that you hire a contractor throughout the year, don't pay them until you get a W-9, so then you know that you're set. But you get busy, I understand. So what we do here at Office Heads, and I highly recommend you do as well, is on a quarterly basis, we run that wizard. You check out to see if you've had any new vendors, see if they're eligible, make sure you have a W-9, because it's so much easier to get those W-9 forms from your vendors throughout the year than it is in January when you're heading up into a deadline. So now, assuming we've got your vendors identified, we've got your chart of accounts identified, we have all of the numbers and information there, you've got your W-9s, and now you need to generate those forms. You have the ability to do it through QuickBooks Online, but there are a lot of other places that you can do it as well. There are two vendors that we have used in the past. We have used tax1099.com. We've also used eFile for Business. So with both of those, and I'll drop this one, this is our most common that we're using right now. You have to have the information. It's just basically data entry or syncing with your QuickBooks file in order to get the information into this platform. And then they go ahead and email 1099s. They notify the IRS on your behalf, and everything is set and done. But remember that the deadline is January 31st. Everything needs to be postmarked and or sent by the 31st of January. So you have a couple of weeks left to get this information either to your financial partner or getting it out the door to get your 1099s out to your contractor. If you have any questions, please keep them below. Always ask questions on either this topic, which I can answer later, or future topics that I can cover to help you financially manage your business for success. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Monday Morning Metrics, and have a great and profitable week.